a legend of one man who persuaded his friends to watch every Godzilla movie ever made. This world is on the brink of destruction. We need you now, Godzillavangelists! Godzillavangelists, a Geek Stew Network podcast, produced and hosted by Ryan Sargent, featuring Sam Schlenker and Joanna Brodecki. Sam, Joanna, I'm afraid I have to admit something to you guys.
Yes, tell us.
This is my deep, terrible secret as a Godzilla evangelist.
What could it be?
I have never seen this movie before.
Either of them?
No, neither version. This is my first time seeing either version.
Why?
So let me take back the clock a little bit. There was obviously the VHS tape of Godzilla 1985 floating around in the rental store. But when I was first getting into my Godzilla obsession as a kid, we tried renting one of the 90s ones. And my mom was watching it and she's like, this is too scary for him. He can't watch these. So I was only allowed to watch the older ones. And then when I got old enough, you could no longer find it. And for the longest time, you couldn't watch any version of this movie officially. And I was a good little boy with bad rural internet, so I didn't want to pirate it. And then by the time I was more open to that idea, I was in like one of my Godzilla wanes. I think, Sam, you'll understand this with James Bond. Sometimes you're just like more excited about it and think more about it than other times. And it never
Ryan,
leaves
don't
you.
tell the fans that. They don't want to know that. Jesus, you're ruining our fucking cover.
You've already lost all of the hardcore fans that we had.
Yeah, bye-bye.
You're going to be leaving angry messages because I lied about my credibility. But then finally, it came out on Blu-ray in late 2016 and I got it for Christmas. But a little podcast idea was in my mind at that time. So I was like, wouldn't it be fun if there was one where I was watching it with you guys for the first time?
Wow. Oh my gosh. And not one, but two.
Yeah, two, basically.
The irony is that I have actually seen this one numerous times, and this time I am the Ryan of the podcast. Godzilla evangelizing to you.
I thought you were going to say that your parents didn't like the Cold War aspect, and they're just trying to keep that out of your brain. They grew up in it and didn't want to re-review it.
I can also believe that, but no, yeah. Well, I've finally seen what today's episode is all about: Return of Godzilla and its Americanization, Godzilla 1985.
Yeah, for that part.
And joining us today is my pal Carter Moon, co-host of the Vaguebooking podcast.
Hello. It's good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So, Carter, I've got to ask this of every new guest. What was your Godzilla experience going into this movie? What do you know about him? What did you feel about him?
I love Godzilla, despite feeling like I haven't really actually seen that many of the movies. I saw the original and Godzilla vs. Mothra as a child when like Netflix was renting DVDs, and like I got the DVDs in the mail. And it's very funny because it's like I was obsessive about watching like my favorite Disney movies and my favorite Star Wars movies, and I would watch those all the time. And when I was a kid, I used to just like watch movies repeatedly. And I remember Godzilla because I only got to watch it one time, and I remember like getting to the end and being like, "Oh, that was awesome!" And then I never got to see it again until I was like in my late teens, and I went back and revisited the original. So I just like I didn't have like a huge attachment to Godzilla as a kid. But I do remember like going to a sleepover and watching one of the Mecha Godzillas and thinking that was also really awesome. And yeah, other than that, like I am definitely a very casual fan, but like I do have a soft spot for Godzilla, to be sure.
Okay. I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, wait, Ryan, did you know that Carter's first film was Mothra?
I didn't know he had seen some of the classics.
I saw the
second.
first Godzilla, and then I got Mothra as well from Netflix. And so I
Okay.
saw both of those, but I only saw them once each, which, like, when I was, like, 6 or 7 was, like, sacrilege to me. Because most of the time, if, like, I liked a movie, I watched it a dozen times at least.
Yeah, those were the movies that I was constantly plugging in my VHS player.
It was Star Wars for me, where the original Star Wars trilogy, I was just...
Oh, yeah. I was doing those, too.
For me, it was Following by Christopher Nolan.
Shut up.
Gotta hold down the fort as the pretentious one who doesn't like your mainstream.
Yes. Welcome, Samuel, to the podcast.
Fortunately, this movie has some very pretentious aspirations, so you could go right along with it.
Right off the bat, I will say this was not the Godzilla movie I was expecting at all going in. Which is a good thing, actually, but it was quite a surprise.
Yeah, seeing this for the first time is so strange, because this is the only Godzilla movie that feels like an 80s movie. There was one technically that came out at the tail end of 89, but it's almost like its own thing, because the rest of this series feels really different. There's like a different creative team behind it. So it was the weirdest one to leave last. It was its own little strange beast. This one has a really interesting history for how it came about, and we could do like a whole episode on just that. So if I get too nerdy laying out all the trivia, just stop me.
We love it, Ryan.
Yeah. Despite the fact that it took 9 years to bring back Godzilla, series producer Tomoyuki Tanaka started trying again almost immediately. Like, going back to 1977, he had ideas. He was working on one where Godzilla fights a shape-shifting monster called Bagan, or maybe it's Bagan in Japanese. Hank Saperstein tried to pitch him Godzilla versus the Gargantuas, which would have been interesting. And then Steve Miner, who directed a bunch of beloved 80s horror movies, tried to remake Godzilla in 1983, and he was really close to actually being the first American Godzilla.
That's what I was going to ask. I was like, is that an American doing a Japanese production, or would it have been an American production?
It would have been an American production. He was like pitching to he almost got it made with Warner Brothers, but they like kept fighting over the budget. They wanted him to do it for $10 million, and he was like, I can't do anything worthwhile for that. Of course, this movie was made for $6 million, but
And you can kind of tell in some parts.
Even at 12 years old, Matthew Broderick was taking his salary was pretty high.
I was going to say, we're very close to Ferris Bueller's Day Off, actually. He could have been it. Meanwhile, some of the classic Godzilla movies were getting re-released in Japan in the early 80s, and they were doing really well at the box office. Like, they put out Mothra vs. Godzilla, and it was like one of Toho's 10 biggest moneymakers for the year, even though it was almost 20 years old at that point. So a group of mostly college students calling themselves the Godzilla Resurrection Committee got 40,000 people to sign a petition to bring Godzilla back. So the pressure was on, and then finally, in early 1984, Tanaka greenlit this movie.
Wait, that is wild. Sorry, just a bunch of college kids were like, we need another one of these.
Yeah.
Well, and it's like pre-internet, so it's not like you're just like sharing a link and getting people to like autofill their information. Like, you are like you're truly a Godzilla evangelist if you're like going person to person and getting them to physically put their signature on a piece of paper.
Oh my god.
It reminds me of like when the final Harry Potter movie got pushed. People were like, we're going to protest that it got pushed 6 months. We need it now. And people went to the movie theater.
Well, yeah, it's like nerds just do that about everything now. Like, you have a petition for anything that nerds are upset by now, but like in the 80s, I feel like that was actually a big deal to like have that commitment and dedication.
Oh yeah. Like, I'm so impressed that they got 40,000 real people to sign this. So once it was released, it's made its money back, but that was largely thanks to the vertical integration of the Japanese movie industry. They would have lost money if Toho didn't own its own theaters. So it fell way short of what they expected. So they were like, well, let's see if an American wants to buy this. And they had high expectations there too. They were shopping to the major studios like Universal and MGM. And they claimed at one point to have gotten an effort to buy it for $2 million, but they, in the press, said they were offended by that. So that, of course, pissed off whoever gave them that offer. And they ended up only getting they had to sell it to Little New World Pictures for $500,000, so a quarter of what they were offered, and like 1/10 of what they wanted. And there's more stories, especially about the Godzilla 1985 Americanization, but I'll parse those out as we go through the highlights because I feel like I've set it up well enough here.
Yeah.
This is such a great example of like just how stupid the movie business is in general, like how ridiculous it is that anybody tries to ever make money off of movies.
So before I dig into the synopsis, do you guys want to give your now traditional like one sentence thoughts on how you felt about it?
Yeah, this isn't even my feelings, but you referenced my James Bond fandom, and I would say I felt very strongly that at least the Japanese version of this movie is the Timothy Dalton Bond era of Godzilla's.
That makes a lot of sense.
It really, if you know both series well, I think it does. That it's relatively serious. It's a little back to basics. There's a little silly that still creeps in for some reason, and it's super 80s, and a little kind of, I don't want to say drab, but a little colorless.
Yeah, there was an intentional like gothic vibe to the whole thing, and you can really feel it.
Yeah, I would say I just loved and was fascinated by the version of, nuclear potential in the Japanese version versus the US version, and the way that kind of all those leaders played out. I thought it was a fun little look at history watching them both back.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of felt like it was sort of tonally confusing, and there were some aspects to it that really took me by surprise just from my expectations of what a Godzilla movie is. But the like Cold War discussions, especially in like the Japanese cut, were like surprisingly, they got to me and they made me feel like, oh shit, nuclear war sucks. This is rough.
Yeah, they brought back that first film vibe.
This is really haunted Japan for generations. That is, it's weird to like toy with those ideas in a movie with a guy in a rubber lizard suit. But I think it kind of rocks. I think it's kind of awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of the only way they could put it on screen, because it's like taboo to discuss it directly.
Yeah,
but I just love too that the US was like, shut it down, cut that part out. We need weapons now.
Yeah. No, he's a regular dinosaur. He's just a dinosaur.
Don't talk about where he came from. All right, let us dig into the synopsis. All right, everybody. Sound effects at the ready. He doesn't sound like that in this one, though.
That's a good point.
While working on a fishing boat, Hiroshi Okamura witnesses a giant monster emerging from an island. Days later, reporter Goro Maki finds the boat adrift, and everybody on board dead, except Hiroshi. The two men narrowly defend themselves from a giant mutant sea louse. And Hiroshi reunites with his mentor, Professor Hayashida. They realize that Hiroshi has witnessed the arrival of a new Godzilla, and the government puts a media blackout on the discovery. Annoyed at his scoop getting squashed, Goro tells Hiroshi's sister Naoko where her brother is, so he can capture the reunion. Meanwhile, a Soviet sub near Japan is destroyed by Godzilla. Tensions rise until the government is forced to reveal Godzilla's existence. The self-defense forces prepare a flying weapon called the Super X. While Goro, Naoko, Professor Hayashida, and Hiroshi continue studying Godzilla.
It's the birds!
Well, not quite yet.
Oh no,
They find their most interesting discovery when Godzilla finally comes ashore and destroys a nuclear power plant, feeding on the reactor. The giant monster seems to be driven by the frequency of certain bird calls.
It's the birds!
It's like, which leads the scientists to develop a wave generator designed to duplicate the frequency. The Japanese Prime Minister faces calls from the US and Soviet Union to allow them to nuke Godzilla, but resolutely turns them down. Soon after, Godzilla attacks the mainland, wreaking havoc. A test of the wave generator seems to show that it works, but the scientists are trapped in a high-rise by Godzilla's destruction. The giant monster also damages a Soviet ship and accidentally triggers the launch of an orbiting nuclear missile.
Oh no.
The Super X is dispatched and seemingly kills Godzilla by launching cadmium missiles into his throat.
Thum, 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 thum.
It's like the pneumatic tube at the pharmacy. A helicopter also arrives to save the scientists, but is forced away by high winds before it can save Goro and Naoko. The government realizes that the Soviet missile is inbound and asks the US to intercept it. The Americans successfully blow it up in the atmosphere, but the fallout revives Godzilla and knocks out the power on the Super X.
Oh man.
Goro and Naoko escape the high-rise with the help of a homeless man.
If you say so.
Alright, we'll come back around to that. Godzilla destroys the Super X and more of Tokyo, but is finally compelled away by the wave generator. Set up on the rim of active volcano Mount Mihara, the waves drive Godzilla into the crater, and explosives bury him in the lava.
Dramatic music. So dramatic. So good. Titanic, basically.
The monster is sealed away until the next movie. So yeah, that's the return of Godzilla.
Well, I feel like right off the bat, the Japanese version of the film being an hour and 45 minutes long, I knew they were getting serious because they're usually about an hour 20. And when I saw that, I went, oh, they're going to have some serious stuff in this movie. I loved the Prime Minister.
He's great.
When they were in the room in the Japanese version, I was like, I could just be watching Lincoln. I'll just take 3 hours of this. I'll just have this guy and his team internally, and then him fighting the US and Russia. I'll take it.
I know. Everything about him was so compelling. I was just like, why can't the movie be about him?
He's just one of those guys where he looks like he really has the full weight of history. And all of Japan is weighing on his shoulders. And he just there's an earnest sadness to him that was very fun.
Right. Like when he was all, we can't lose our heads because of a crisis. When he was going on that monologue, who do you have to tell us what to do? I was like, yes! I was ready to stand up and clap for him.
Yeah, when he was taking a break from the meeting and taking those pulls off the cigarette, he was sucking out the nicotine for his life.
he needed that nicotine to ground him to reality. He was really about to snap.
Yeah.
That was, I agree. That was by far my favorite part of the movie, honestly.
Yeah.
It's just watching him really try to convince the US and the Soviet Union not to nuke his country again.
Yeah, well, and the characters that they had, the U.S., this strong-jawed, American
excellent
man,
casting.
and then
very funny casting.
focused in on this disheveled-haired Russian man. Just so good.
It was crazy, how much different the dubs were too for these versions. The dub acting, I felt was a lot better in the Japanese version. And in the American version, I can't remember which character it was, but there was a guy who, it just sounded like they literally just pulled a guy off the street and were here, read this.
Well, and the woman, she was like, well, me, sir, I just study at the university. I was like, is it 1945? What are we doing? Where the hell are we? A little better in the Japanese version.
In a throwback to Godzilla Raids Again, she looks about half the age of her love interest.
Yeah, she does. And I will say about that love interest, I felt not too much towards them, especially in the American version. We barely saw them at all. But
yeah, the American version especially just cuts of the many things that they're just details. We don't need to dwell on any of this for too long. That was one where it was just I didn't even really realize they were supposed to be a love interest in the American cut because I watched that one first, and I went back to the Japanese one and I was like, oh, okay, I see how these pieces connect together a little better.
Well, you got to save time. You got to save time for Steve Martin looking at a screen. Valuable real estate in this movie.
What did you guys... I was hoping to surprise you. What did you guys think of the surprise return of Steve Martin in the American version?
Not enough of him. I wanted more Steve.
Wait, he was the reporter, right?
Yeah.
I kind of wanted John Goodman to be in that part the whole time. I was like, man, if John Goodman was just playing this part, what fun we would have. And he wasn't in the Japanese version at all, right?
Right.
No.
Not at all.
Which clearly I didn't miss him too much, because by the end of the film, it wasn't until we just started recording that I went, oh wait, they didn't have that guy in the other.
I was excited when he showed up, and I was like, oh, he's back. He's gonna be super demeaning to all of the Japanese people in the movie. Like, this is gonna be a fun time. And weirdly, he didn't bring any silliness. He was like dead serious and like, and kind of somber, and they brought the silly by just dubbing everyone poorly. So I was kind of disappointed. I wanted 1950s Steve Martin. I wanted him to show up and be like, in a fake over the shoulder that never actually happened, be like, tell me what happened. I'm here to solve the problem myself because I'm an American and you're but a fishmonger. Like that's what I wanted, and not like, looking sensitively into a TV screen from across the world.
In the American cut, there is just a lot of like, why do I care about what the Americans think about this? Like, why it's the Japanese cut is so much more straightforward of just like you're just watching like the Japanese characters deal with Godzilla coming back in a way that like was just much easier to follow.
Have you seen the original American cut of the original movie with him?
No, I don't think I have.
Because that's obviously what they're trying to do with this.
Yeah.
And in that movie, they had Raymond Burr in it, obviously younger. But they actually like do fake over the shoulders and actually put him in the action with characters as though he was there in the scenes.
Sure.
And that at least is intellectually very, very fun to just be like, they thought they could do this.
They thought they could pull this off. They thought this looked good. Yeah.
Yeah. It gives it a kind of a sixth sense. Bruce Willis can't interact with anyone.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
I was gonna say, how does this fit into your theory of Steve Martin being dead?
Well, it's still possible. I mean, I think I have to believe that all the other Americans in that room are also dead.
Yeah, I think that's the only way it works. And his grandson can see his ghost. That's
Right.
They have a PA working a Ouija board just to like summon all these ghosts to have them all assembled for that scene.
I love their like, he's a kind person, he has a grandson. I love that they had it.
You gotta include that.
Also, too, that the only justification they gave, they were like, this man saw Godzilla 50 years ago. They didn't give any other background. And it's like, why would he know what to do? Just
Because
he saw him, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna point out that these hundreds of Japanese people see Godzilla currently. Much more helpful to what you're trying to do.
I've been studying him for 50 years.
And he doesn't do anything. He in fact, he tells them how useless they are.
Yeah, I wonder how much he got paid. Ryan, give us the stat. Do you know? Come on.
I do. He got paid $50,000 for 1 day of work.
Wow, what?
Yeah, they shot literally nothing but him on the first day, and then shot like people reacting to him.
No, you can kind of tell. You can kind of tell it's actors reacting as if Steve Martin is there.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is it's Raymond Burr himself that made the movie, the American version, so serious, because originally the producer who bought it looked at it and he was like, okay, the only way we can make this work in America in 1985 is to make this like self-consciously goofy, like a what's up Tiger Lily kind of thing. But he also had the idea like, oh, it'd be fun to bring Raymond Burr back. And when Raymond Burr heard what they were going to do, he was like, no. I take Godzilla very seriously as a nuclear metaphor. To his credit, he's like, I'm not going to be silly. So they had to like pull it way back. And then they were going to give like some goofy lines to the general, who's played by Warren Keverling, who is great. He's like the second best actor in this. Yeah. But Warren Keverling was like, you're not paying me enough to be this stupid and goofy. So they had to pass literally all the silly lines to the young major played by Travis Swords.
Yes, this one, quite an urban renewal project they've got going on over there. And like the dorky southern accent,
Is that how actors, Joanna, you'll have to explain this to me. Is that how actors work their rates? Is on a sliding scale of silliness? It's like
yeah, 1,000%. But for me, I'm like, okay, up the silly, and you gotta throw me another 100K, just so you all listening know what my day rate is as you're paying attention.
Joanna is like 2 Steve Martin rates per day.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And again, I come with a cap. Like, it's X amount of jokes, and any jokes beyond that, it's $10K per joke that you want on camera.
Yeah,
So
it's like how some actors take a stunt bonus. Joanna takes a just being funny bonus.
Right, exactly.
It's
So
costing us $1 million alone to get you on this very silly episode.
hey, but that's Hollywood, baby. You know?
Yeah, I don't know if the listeners knew how much we get paid per episode of this podcast. It's crazy.
Joe Rogan numbers.
Last thing about the actors is we have a few cameo roles from the old cast. Most prominently is Yosuke Natsuki as Professor Hayashida, who is almost unrecognizable, but he was Detective Shindo in Ghidorah. He was the police detective, so he's now back as the serious mustachioed scientist.
I'm never mad about the serious scientist role. I feel like it's usually always executed as planned. You know, they do a good job, whoever's playing the part. I'm always happy to have that trusty professor on our side.
Is it just me, or do we always like the character professionals in these movies, like character actor professionals, and it's always the leads that are the problem?
Yeah.
Feels like all the fun goes into just the person who's doing their job on the side, and then it's like, oh, the one who has to like carry the love story. Ugh.
Okay, I will say that the American version of this one did give me a little like a little of a cringe watching it, because I feel like it was. We've seen it before, but this was the first time that they were like, oh no, they're really starting to dig into just throwing us a bunch of people and nothing's grounded and they're just saying stuff and nothing matters. And that's kind of how it gave me vibes of some of the more current ones.
The recent Godzillas, yeah.
I've been feeling that the whole time.
Well, yeah. That too.
Oh,
No,
good old grumpy Sam.
I know. I'm back. He's back. He was hibernating for a little bit, but
We missed him.
it's the 80s. It's a new decade. No, the definitely the Americans who aren't actually affecting anything really like just throw the balance off. Where it's really interesting. I felt, with the Godzilla 1984, I felt it. Honestly, or Godzilla Returns, I felt it to be a little slow, but pretty well paced. And then I found the American one to be kind of snappy, and I felt the pacing. It's just the trims that they made kind of everywhere to the bulk of the movie really helpful. And then I found the last 25 minutes or so where we have to have a lot more of the Americans standing in a room to just be like lugubrious, just like so slow. And it's so funny. I was like, oh, at least this is kind of moving, and then it's just like completely throws off the ending.
Yeah, see, I watched the American version first. I watched Godzilla 1985 first, and then went back and did Return of Godzilla. And I have to admit, doing it that way, I ended up liking the Japanese one a little more, because it was like...
That's the same.
Yeah, I liked the, okay, when he gets on the boat, he fights the sea urchin way longer, and it's more of, this protracted, ridiculous fight, and that was fun. I liked that, the submarine, before it gets attacked by Godzilla, there was more of the submarine commander freaking out for a minute, trying to figure out if nuclear war has started or not down in the sub. That's a great little bit to me that they chopped out of the American version, and, that kind of stuff. The kind of, and I, like I say, I just also liked, just kind of a more straightforward, we're just gonna follow these Japanese characters and they're the main focus. We're not gonna keep cutting back to the Americans as much. I just felt in that much more straightforward, much easier to just get to the stuff that I really want, which is to watch Godzilla wreck shit. So yeah, in that way I liked it.
Oh yeah, and let the record state, I think the Japanese one is a considerably better movie. I'm in the same boat. I don't think that, I'm not saying that the American cut with all this nonsense added and important stuff taken out is better. It's just I appreciated the just that you just kind of just sort of breezed through for a long time, but then again it just got so weighed down at the end with people staring at screens, which was actually especially funny in the part. There's the scene at the end where is it the Prime Minister? Who is it? I can't remember now. Who we get a shot of him staring at Godzilla as he's sinking into the volcano.
Prime Minister.
Yeah, that's the Prime
Minister.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Sad.
And really a good moment in the original movie, and then in the American one, we have that moment, and then we have to cut to Steve Martin doing the same thing, and it's like, oh, okay.
And then the American, they did that 700, like when they first announced in the American, they're like, Godzilla's back. Then they went, cut. I thought it was never going to end. I'm like, how many fucking facial reactions are we going to show here?
I was actually fairly split. Like, I think they both had a lot of advantages. I really liked the pacing improvements that the American version had. The first act especially went by so much faster. And they made his attack on Tokyo look better by cutting out some of the shakier special effects and like doing some better cross-cutting.
Definitely. The action in general, especially that nuclear plant attack, just like it felt kind of modern, how much just like tighter it was.
But we'll come around to give our final opinions at the end. But now, one thing you brought up is the giant sea lice, which I really like that. I thought that was a fun idea for the Godzilla world. I'm like, sure, he's got parasites sucking on his radioactive blood, making them all mutated.
So gross.
No, and it's like, it's really nasty when like it's on top of him and he's like wrestling it off of him in the boat. Like, that part was super fun. And I liked like, it's funny how like, you said it feels like an 80s movie, and like it really does. Like, that opening kind of feels like a fucking Indiana Jones movie, or like the beginning of The Thing, even, where you're just kind of like coming onto these like weird twisted corpses and he's getting covered in slimes. It's awesome.
That like face that he turned around in the chair.
Yeah, that could have been Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's so fun.
Yeah.
That is probably the most horrific thing I think I've seen in a Godzilla movie. I was shocked.
A lot of the stuff in this movie kind of surprised me as somebody who thought that like after the first Godzilla, it was just like all goof 'em ups, like silly monster fights, campy stuff, until like you did like the American remakes and everything like that. Like, and so I really was not expecting this to be like quite so dour, quite so serious and everything.
Yeah, all those guys drained of their blood definitely reminded me of The Thing. Godzilla himself is also very creepy and strange. The design they did for this, they brought back a bunch of his more frightening or monstrous characteristics from the first two movies. They gave him the fangs back, the four-toed feet, the like heavy brow, and like the wall eyes.
Yeah, I was gonna say the eyes looked madder again.
Yeah, but at the same time, it also made his head like really big and his eyes really big, which are conventionally cute features.
Yes. No, so it's one of the most jarring parts is that like he kind of is still adorable. Like, he's still like cute Godzilla in some ways, despite the fact that he's supposed to be, you know, very intense and the pure metaphor of nuclear evil.
Yeah. It was a tonally dissonant design. I was not sure. He was almost off-putting to look at because he was
in a way it's almost more upsetting to think about like, oh, this monster that's created by like man's nuclear hubris is also kind of cute. Like, that's like a weird thing. Like, that's a weird contradiction.
Well, he's got kind of an attractive quality. Like, he's kind of dangerous, but there's a sensitive side. Yeah.
Those eyes.
You're like, he's cousins to Barney.
Yeah.
I like that they had this shot when he first arrived at the nuclear spot, when that guy, like, the ground cracked and he fell on the ground. They did this like shot all the way up him, which is classic, but they also had that same shot for not the Russian but the American ambassador in the American version.
Yes, literally when I was like watching the American version, I have to admit I was watching it while I was working, and I was like, wait, did I just like reverse? Did I just like somehow go back in the video and I'm watching this, like I'm watching the earlier part of the movie again?
Yeah, I think it maybe was the Russian guy, but it was just funny. He had this like crisp black pant on, and they were like, "Oh, this is a bad guy. Oh, we're panning up on this scary Russian ambassador man."
Perhaps an intentional visual echo.
Right, exactly.
The thing that jumped out at me with Godzilla's design was just how much detail there was on the inside of his mouth.
Yeah,
I found like the ridges of the top of his mouth, the roof of his mouth, to be too detailed. I did not care for it.
So what's interesting is the shots I'm pretty sure you're talking about were of this was the first Godzilla movie where they used proper animatronics, and for promotional purposes they decided to build it at a scale that was way bigger than it needed to be. So they built this 16-foot Godzilla Cybot to do all those like very detailed facial close-ups, and it's pretty cool. It's like not quite stable though, so it's a little wobbly, which in some shots makes it work because he's like wobbling while he's roaring, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. But then there's a shot where he's like swatting at planes and he's like trembling, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
no, shouldn't have used that there. Let me share my screen so I can show you a little bit of this Cybot.
公開され人気を集めました。どちらが展示されたのは
No, yeah, the fangs are very scary. Good fangs.
吹田駅前の広場で正午過ぎ大きな
That one guy's fangs.
That guy's watching. Oh my god, the kid.
Oh no!
He looks so
she's
scared.
so
This
scared.
little
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, like
a
16-foot tall Godzilla right there would be terrifying if you're 4 or 5.
Yeah.
If you're a little baby. Yeah.
God, his tail is so fun. I love like watching his tail like swing around and wreck shit.
Yeah.
I just always love how chunky his legs are. Every time, consistently, they've just gotten bigger and bigger. Yeah, he looks mad.
He does a lot of leg day.
Yeah.
He's always got the thick legs. Godzilla does.
Except in Godzilla 98, where he's kind of a lean boy.
Oh, right, where he's like a dinosaur, lean little boy.
Also, speaking of Godzilla, I have to talk about one of my biggest problems with this movie, which is the idea of Godzilla following the birds.
It's so dumb.
It's really stupid.
Really dumb.
Godzilla has a bird brain. Isn't that awesome? Have you ever thought about that before? What if Godzilla was a bird?
Makes him
I
seem
feel that-
very stupid and not cool that he would
Yeah,
walk all the way up to the rim of a volcano just following the sounds.
Well, Ryan, no one ever said he was a genius, you know? So,
Or maybe he is really smart. He's just an ornithologist and is pursuing them for intellectual reasons.
He needs to put them in his bird spotting book.
Sam, great toss out of that, the scientific specific study. I didn't know that that's what it was.
Well, I have a really embarrassing reason for knowing the word ornithologist. It's because I watch birds for fun. No, it's because there's a really stupid James Bond one-liner that revolves around the word ornithologist.
This makes more sense. I'm gonna take back the credit that I gave you.
There's also the part where in the original version they like are looking at like a scan of his brain, and he's talking about like magnetism or something, and he's like, oh, there's a scan of the brain, it is magnetic something or other, nuclear, blah blah blah. And in the American one, they're looking at the same image, and he's just like, look, his brain is like a bird brain. he's they're dinosaurs and birds. Yeah.
It's a bird brain. We've all been there before.
And I think that's also like one of the performances where like the dubbing is significantly worse in the American version, so it was just very jarring.
Yeah, I was like, why did you change that? That seems
Yeah,
unnecessary.
I don't know, it's very weird. I have to admit, I was like really hoping the like Japanese version was going to be subtitled, but like the dub actually was significantly better.
Yeah. Although the Japanese version, the Russian accents in the Japanese version,
Yeah.
in both versions, but particularly in that one, who knows what the hell they were doing. They're like, and it was just so off. It was bad.
I'm obsessed with how they were saying Godzilla in Russian. It was like Godzilla.
Yeah. They were like using way too many syllables in everything that they were doing. We will use the weapons. It's like, what is that? Which version is that?
But before we move away from the bird thing, another big problem is it gives the ending away like halfway through the movie. Like as soon as you hear the plan, you know what's gonna
I
happen.
put that in my notes. I was like, so this is how we're doing it. We've just already figured out how to beat Godzilla for this movie. All right.
Yeah, and the only reason the movie doesn't end 30 minutes sooner is they get stuck in the high rise.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that and am I crazy, or was the entire a nuclear missile has been launched? Oh, we gotta get rid of it. Just kind of killing time.
Felt that way to me. It was just kind of like, oh, we got to make this more complicated. It was introducing a complication.
Yeah, because it felt like Godzilla was at least dispatched, or he was no longer a threat. He was put in sleepy time, and then it's like, oh, there's a missile coming, but like it's not like the missile thing. It's like if that was the real problem, that would be interesting, but it's not. Like if it was Godzilla, we thought Godzilla was the problem, but it's actually nuclear war. Like, cool.
Yeah,
but
no, that's what I was hoping when I was first like watching through it. I was kind of hoping that was what it was going to get to, was that like, oh, really, it's like mankind's hubris and the use of nuclear weapons that we're like condemning here. The weapons are worse than Godzilla himself. I was really hoping that's what this movie was going to be, and it's not, and that's fine, but it would have been a much more compelling thing for sure.
Well, right, and the only effect it has is that it wakes him back up. It's like the world's most deadly alarm clock.
I'll defend it a little bit. I think the specifics are off, but I think that it is trying to say what you guys are saying.
No, yeah, that's the thing, is like, especially in the Japanese cut where like they're deliberating much longer, where like the Japanese prime minister is arguing with the like Soviets and the Americans. I really liked that sequence. I really was like, damn, yeah, this is like really getting to me of like the horrors of nuclear war and like how they last for generations and everything like that. I thought that part was really cool, and it's just cool to like try that with a Godzilla movie.
Yeah. And so the missile coming down feels like an extension of that to me, where it's like, oh, of course you can't control nuclear power once you put it out there. And so I like that fit with the theme. But I get it. The specifics are a little bit off. Like, they should have made it more clear Godzilla was like dead or like on the verge of death, than that the only thing bringing him back was the nuke fallout.
I think that for me, it's just I want it to feel like the nuclear thing is the real problem, as opposed to, again, it just sort of was like, it was like a speed bump, and then we got to get back to getting Godzilla to birdwatch his way into a volcano, which I think is the issue. Also, I did think it was very funny that, you know, when the two nukes smash into each other and then it becomes like, you know, Red October out there. There's like a line in the American cut where someone basically is like, "Boy, is the air dangerous?" And someone else was like, "No, it's fine." Like, I don't remember what their
It just looks
explanation
cool
was.
now.
Yeah, like someone's just like, "Oh yeah, don't worry about it. I've been in many nuclear tests and it's totally safe."
Yeah, that was the young punk general. But then Raymond Burr like rebukes him, and he's like, "No, this is actually very serious."
I love that he's like, no jokes for me. If I'm in the movie, it will all be serious.
But speaking of the Russian missile, let's talk about that big story swap that the American version did. So, as I said in the synopsis, in the Japanese version, it's an accident. And the commander of the ship is like trying his hardest, like throwing his life into it to stop this launch. And in the American version, he's throwing his life into making sure that he can launch the missile at Tokyo.
It made no sense. Was it like in the American version, was the logic like, oh, I'll stop Godzilla if I put this off? Or was he just mad about something?
I think that was the idea, is that, yes, it is up to me to defend the Soviet Union by stopping Godzilla here. But, I mean, the real purpose...
Is America good?
Yes. Is America
obvious.
good?
Cold War.
Yeah, Japan coming in and being like, America will help us with their
nuclear weapons that they have used against us in the past.
Right.
Well, they do that in the Japanese version too, though. They're like, maybe we
Yeah.
can get America to launch a nuke and intercept it. And I'm like, half of me is like, even that felt like
Totally.
maybe we don't want. They should be like, I wish that someone was like, we could ask if someone suggested that, like, maybe we can get America to launch one of their myriad of nukes that they have pointed everywhere in the world to intercept it, and then someone's like, should we? Like that would have been more appropriate.
They needed that behind the scenes debate too. Yeah, that would have been a better structure of it. They were
That's
still
true.
clearly stuck in some ways. But yeah, that was hilarious. But then in the American version, they still kept being like, Russia, well, they accidentally set it off, but now we're going to save.
Yeah, I felt bad for the Russian captain of that boat, because like, this guy's a hero. He's trying his hardest, and then he turns into the total villain in the American version.
Russia is very bad, Ryan.
Maybe you shouldn't have been born Russian, Ryan.
Yeah, exactly, Ryan. Jesus.
It's all craziness. Was it a different time? I feel like, has anything changed?
No, yeah. I mean, I think if you had like this scenario today where like nuclear weapons were being used in a movie, like an American recut of any movie would also just need to make sure you made the Russians more overtly the villains.
Yeah. I feel like in any movie, it's still Russia or China are the only bad guys in the world, and America is never.
America's never done anything wrong. America is just a sweet little baby. The sweetest little
Like-
country that's ever been.
We need a bad guy, get a Russian man with a haggard-looking haircut, throw some specs on him, call it a day.
Yeah, why were all the Russian guys so hairy?
I loved that, like,
Siberia.
the Russian submarine captain didn't look particularly Russian to me. Like, he just kind of looked like a guy. It did kind of feel like the Japanese were like, yeah, all white people are the same, and then just come through a bunch of random Europeans.
Yeah.
You're hired, but before we hire you, can you do a Russian accent?
And he's like, no, I can't. And they're like, perfect.
Good enough. Yeah.
It'll do.
Now let's talk about the Super X, the anti-nuclear
Yeah.
flying rice cooker.
So Super X was like, all right, this is what I expect from a Godzilla movie. I came into this movie hoping to see a silly little spaceship fight Godzilla.
At first, I was like not so hot on it because I was like, oh, this was interesting because it was approaching things so realistically. And then out of nowhere, there's a flying fortress. But I had fun with it for what it was.
Yeah.
I liked its little battle with Godzilla where he was like chasing it and like blew a hole like through a building. That was a lot of fun.
It made me really miss the animated series and that older gentleman's robot. I was like, oh man, I wish we had that back.
No, one thing I was wishing with the Super X was I was wishing they'd like push it as more of like a moment. I wish there'd been like fun score
Yeah.
and like it'd really been like super exciting and all that stuff of like it that whole sequence of Godzilla attacking Tokyo, it's like in the Japanese cut especially, it's just kind of like it is one of the parts where like there's not as much vim and vigor as I kind of was hoping for Godzilla destroying Tokyo. I was kind of hoping for more like, you know, just big moments to happen. And it's just kind of like, and he's destroying Tokyo.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. And as you pointed out, the Super X just shows up. They're like, where is it? Oh, it's here.
It's
and then all of a sudden
there's
it's flying
no like
towards
there's
Godzilla.
no good like sequence of like, oh, they're gonna mount up and they're gonna all get in the Super X, and it's like you get introduced to the like pilot and he's a hot shot and he's a little bit of a loose cannon, like all that stuff that you could have done of like setting up them as characters a little more and giving it more of a like pizzazz just isn't quite there. But at the same time, it's fun to just see a little spaceship shooting at Godzilla.
No, have you guys seen? There's actually a spin-off show about a guy who is dating a girl who pilots that ship. Do you know about that show?
Oh boy, Sam.
My Super Ex-Girlfriend.
Sure.
But that does feel like one of the movie's most obvious mistakes is why would you not have one of the central characters be a pilot
Yeah.
on the Super X?
Right. Yeah.
It's like, have you seen a movie before?
No, yeah, it's very confusing how it's just like 4 dudes. They had cool costumes though. I did like their costumes. I did remember that. I was
The
like,
costumes are always good in Godzilla movies.
They continue the tradition of guys in space rocket weapons wearing bright orange, which I love. One small question about that sequence is when Godzilla was taking those cadmium glizzies, there's like green goo running down his mouth, and I'm like, what is that? What is your best theory on what was coming out of Godzilla's mouth?
Oh, I think they had to couch
Nuclear
it.
blood.
Oh, I think no. I think that they had to couch it in like a giant fruit gusher. Like that's the only way to get him to swallow it.
It's like a dog. You got to wrap his medicine.
Yeah, I
in
wonder if that'll
cheese.
work for my cat and he has old cat pills he's got to take.
Yeah, you should try it.
Jumping to something random. Shall we talk about the Dr. Pepper?
Dr. Pepper.
So, surprisingly, Toho had actually negotiated this advertising deal with Dr. Pepper separately, but it just happened to be in the works when New World was getting ready to put out Godzilla 1985, and they're like, okay, let us get on this. So they reformulated the campaign, and they put so much product placement in the movie to the point where even when Steve Martin's grandson is playing, there's a Dr. Pepper can on the floor with his toys for some reason.
that rocks.
Yeah, just rolling around. I have a great story where the director of the American footage was talking to the Dr. Pepper rap on set, and he's like, "You gotta get Raymond Burr to take a drink of Dr. Pepper. Like, get it, put that in the movie." And so the director walked up to Raymond Burr, and he's like, "Hey, what do you think about like just taking a drink of this real quick?" And Raymond Burr just like stared at him, like, gave him like dagger eyes,
and then without breaking eye contact with his mean stare, he reached out of frame and grabbed a single fruit gusher and ate it.
And so he went back to the Dr. Pepper up, and he's like, "Try again. You got to get him to do it." He said, "You get him to do it if you want him to drink it so bad." So they compromised by making, again, poor Travis Swords drink the Dr. Pepper.
The one actor who they can give all the silly lines and product placement to because everyone else is above it.
To any reps listening, I'm available for those parts.
He goes home at the end of the day and he looks at himself in the mirror and he's like, "What have I become? I'm a joke. I'm a shell of a human being.
I don't even like Dr. Pepper, and they made me say Wonder Lizard is down for the count."
Where am I? Pounding on the mirror. Well, let me show you one of the Dr. Pepper ads because it's pretty great.
The monster! Godzilla! The monster!
Really?
We must stop Godzilla before he destroys the city.
Yeah.
I'm saying a prayer.
Oh, he's gonna destroy
For the
Cola.
whole world.
Glug glug, motherfucker.
What could he
Lemonade's not good enough.
Why is this commercial so
Oh my God. Appease him.
Nice. Wait, who has like
this
a
is not
Dr.
real.
Pepper silo on top of their house?
Wow, I love that Coke has the winter, the Christmas bear, and
Dr. Pepper has Godzilla.
Wow, that's some madman little shit. Quality advertisement. Do you know how much Dr. Pepper paid for their partnership?
Yes, it was a $10 million deal.
Wow. Wait. More than
The budget of...
more than the budget of the film?
Yep.
Yeah. Seems about right.
Checks out, yeah.
Yeah, that all adds up. The movie business is fucking stupid.
Dr. Pepper played a significant part in Toho and New World making a profit off this movie.
Wow. I wonder who first pitched it at Dr. Pepper. Like, listen, guys, I got the connection for us.
I know, it's such an outside
Yeah.
idea, but it works somehow.
I wonder, like, how popular was Godzilla in the U.S. at this time?
Right.
Like, this kind of seems like a lull in Godzilla's popularity in the U.S., right?
Yeah, like, I guess he was best known in the late 70s in
Right.
the US, arguably, because that's when his most financially successful movies
Sure.
came out. But that was sort of the problem, is that that's how America knew him, as, like, for some reason, the lowest budgeted Godzilla movies were the most successful in the US, so
Sure.
they knew him as this, like, very cheesy superhero.
Totally,
And so
yeah.
I think that put New World in a weird spot in how they were going to market this movie and why it ends up like weirdly tonally messed up.
Yeah.
The special effects were done by Teruyoshi Nakano, who did all the 70s ones, and he was like very insistent on doing this because he wanted this to be his redemption, because all the ones he did in the 70s were done for extremely low budgets. So he's like, I want to show what I can do with the bigger budget. And to his credit, about like 40% of the effects shots look really good, and they're like about on par with what everyone except ILM was doing at the time. But the other 60% still pretty rough. Still shows that like way under American budget. But yeah, what did you guys think of the Godzilla visuals?
They were
wasn't-
fine. They were about like
Yeah.
what I expected from like what I understood about this era of Godzilla movies.
Yeah, I would, still a little corny by the time you get up to the face, but that's okay. My favorite effect in the American version was the title in that version, just that PowerPoint word art, like whoosh,
The flames cutting through. That is pretty cool.
Red Godzilla. I was like, wow, this is really taking me back.
Part of the problem is that because Tokyo's skyline had gotten so much taller since the 50s, they finally upgraded Godzilla's scale. So he went from 50 meters to 80 meters. But as we've talked about, the bigger the monster is, the smaller miniatures have to be, which means less detail, which means they won't look as good.
Right, right.
And I don't even know why they bothered, because Godzilla still looks tiny compared to some of those
Some of the buildings, yeah.
skyscrapers.
Just kind of leaning against them a little bit.
Yeah, I thought he looked good when he was at the nuclear plant, but then Tokyo, yeah.
No, the Tokyo sequence was kind of like, it just looked a little silly the way I kind of like expected it to look a little silly. And if you're like down for that and you embrace that, it's kind of fun, but it's not like awe-inspiring Godzilla.
Right. I'd say some of like the chest up shots in Tokyo look pretty good, but yeah, anytime you see Godzilla walking, it's always
the wides, yeah.
And I thought I liked all of the part where he was attacking the Russian submarine, anything out in the water. I was a fan of.
Mm-hmm.
No, yeah, that bit where like he's like fighting the like jet pilots and everything before he like gets to Tokyo proper. I thought that looked good. I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, I do like always enjoy just a like, oh, you cut back to a crowd of people inside of what Godzilla is wrecking and they just kind of roll around. That's always fun. Yeah.
Pick up a train and they'll...
Yeah. I love that shot. I love the shot of like his eye looking into the train and everything like that. That's premium Godzilla shit to me.
And
that's what I sign up for when I come to Godzilla.
We spotted the first Godzillavangelist in that scene, the Christian priest who smiles at Godzilla.
Oh, for sure.
When he looks into the train.
That I did write down as being very strange. That you just have this scene of Godzilla picking up the train and just multiple shots of people looking horrified because they're about to die, and then just one smiling man. Just one man. That was quite something.
Yeah, I'm told it's some cultural thing with how Japanese people perceived Christians in their culture at the time. I guess kind of like how we see like overly peppy Jehovah's Witnesses coming to the door.
That is funny. I love that.
Yeah, but I still found it really funny because it fits so well with our podcast. It's like, oh, of course, the priest is happy to see Godzilla.
Yeah, Ryan's like, take me now!
I mean, if you're gonna die, that has to be among the best ways to die.
No, I want to go when Yellowstone explodes. I want to be right there. I want to see it. I want to be one of the first people gone.
I grew up in Colorado Springs, which has NORAD in it. Mm-hmm. And I had this like history teacher in high school tell me, she was like, oh, I love living here. Because like if nuclear war really does break out, like we're just going to go in a flash. He's like, we'll be the first to go. We won't have to worry about it. We won't have to live through the fallout. They're going to knock this town out immediately. And I was just like, yeah, I guess. I don't really think that's a good thing.
I love tired teachers. They're the best brand of people.
Yeah, it's a classic.
That's just how she saw the world. She's like, no, this is good, actually. It's great that like America's at the brink of a nuclear apocalypse at any given time. It's sick.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
She'd fit in well in this movie.
Yeah.
But speaking of goofy characters, how did you feel about the homeless guy walking around Tokyo?
I like that.
I had a ball.
Great fit with the
I'm
rest
like
of the movie.
him right in the restaurant and like loading up a feast. I'm like, hell yeah, dude. That's the right thing to do if Godzilla comes to your town.
Yeah, he could have broken out in song. Oh yeah, his Tokyo in August, all of it. I was ready for it.
I like how he calls Godzilla an out-of-towner.
Yeah. Him getting like kind of fist-raising mad at Godzilla for ruining his good time. Awesome.
That was an interesting change that they were going to make in the American version. Because in the Japanese version, it's kind of ambiguous what happens to him. He just kind of like passes out in the rubble. In the American version, they were going to cut it so he was explicitly squashed by Godzilla. And they shot new stuff for it, actually, where they were going to have his bloody hand sticking out of the rubble, and his watch was going to be like set to the time that the bombs fell in Hiroshima, because they thought that would be an interesting touch. Yeah.
Oh my god, that is some dark shit.
Yeah, you know that Raymond Burr suggested that. Like, you know that was a Raymond Burr
That's
suggestion.
actually like evil. That is, I don't know.
But they didn't have time to shoot it properly, so like the preview audience was like, what the hell is going on in that shot? So they took it out.
Yeah.
Probably for the best.
Immediately the preview audience was like, that's not the time the bombs fell. You didn't set the watch right at all. Cut it out.
One other little thing I do like about the American version, although my research shows me it wasn't a change they made. But anyway, when Godzilla falls into the volcano, you get this extremely eerie, like, death scream.
Oof, dark, yeah.
Like, very creepy, like, high-pitched, like a frightened Godzilla. And
it was like Wicked Witch of the West vibes. Like, I had recently seen Wicked on Broadway, and I was like, here we are back again, melting the Wicked Witch. Yeah. And the soundtrack at that point, I think in both, but the soundtrack for the death, I was there for it. I was there for the orchestra swells.
It's all set to defying gravity.
Yeah, exactly.
Godzilla defying gravity, flying through the air. Apparently, it was cut out of the Japanese version in its modern release because somebody at Toho thought Godzilla should never be scared. So that's why it's not in the Japanese version, but it was originally, apparently. But I thought that was very...
Yeah, I think it's a great touch. It is chilling.
Yeah, it was the only part of the American film that like really got to me, I feel like.
And I thought it fit well, especially because they're trying to like inject a little bit of like somberness to Godzilla's death, which I think you need to make him feel very sympathetic in that moment.
Yeah, the only other thing I wrote down was in the American version, there's a line where Raymond Burr is talking about the destruction that Godzilla caused back in 1956, the year of the first Godzilla, of course. But he says Godzilla showed up, and the damage was in the billions, and like that's just so funny that they measure it by how much money. How much like in the money amount of damage,
Right,
and not the
the
like thousands of
human
people who
lives.
died.
Yeah.
Many beautiful porches were crushed.
Yes. Storefronts, never the same.
It is interesting because even in the Japanese version, there's a minister at one point talking about like, if you let Godzilla attack Japan, our economy is finished.
Yeah.
Right.
This is what people always worried about that.
When people talk about fucking climate change right now, that's what they say. They're just like, the economy will never recover, and that's
Right.
like way to frame it. And it's like,
Jesus.
well, but what about people who won't have food?
Right. It probably should.
We probably should prioritize that a little bit more in our apocalyptic thinking, not so much the money that will be lost. One thing I did want to say is that like I did enjoy a lot of the like explosions in this. I thought that they looked fantastic. Like just the like real fire blowing up around Godzilla looks really fucking cool.
Yes, there's some prime explosions.
It did make me kind of be like, how insane would it be if they did a like Mad Max Fury Road with Godzilla, like using modern film technology, but also like a lot of practical effects with a big Godzilla. It could be very fun. I don't know who would really want to do that and take the risk of the money it would take to do like all practical effects modern Godzilla, but I'd love it.
Me too. Ironically, the closest we got to that is in the 90s. There was a Godzilla versus Charles Barkley commercial that Nike did, but ILM did the effects, and so it looks really cool, and it makes you like kind of realize what that would
Listeners,
look like.
it's time to sign the petition. Let's get it going.
And that's part of what was cool about this, is like seeing it for the first time, seeing the like big step forward in technology, and obviously still very hampered by the low budget, but seeing them like use all the stuff that was developed in the early 80s and put to work in, you know, movies like The Thing and the Star Wars trilogy. I like that. The shot of like the helicopter falling and making all the cars explode on the highway did not look good. That was one of the worst shots in the movie, but because the explosions were so cool, I was still like on board. I was like, yeah, blow up all those little cars.
I mean, yeah, like you're signing up for these movies for fun destruction, and there is the fun destruction is like it's really crazy how it is like kind of in that like in between of like, we're not doing CGI yet, we're still doing a lot of practical stuff, and we've got like a lot of the advances in practical effects that we've done, but also at the end of the day, like, it is these miniatures that are blowing up and everything, and like, it doesn't look totally real, but it is fun still, for sure.
For you, Carter, and for any new listeners. As Godzillavangelists, it is our holy duty to place each movie in its proper place in Godzilla heaven, hell, or purgatory. With heaven being the best, hell being the worst, and purgatory, of course, falling in the middle. So we'll go ahead and give our judgments, and we'll say which version we like better. And if you feel like they ended up in different tiers, you can do that as well. Sam, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, I can do that. Well, at the risk of sounding negative, starting this off on a negative note. No, I think I am going to go purgatory. And my reason is, well, one, I've been too generous with the heavens.
You really have been, man.
There are an awful lot of 6.7s that I've been giving heaven, and I so I think the way I see it is purgatory just means we get to decide later whether we want to bump it up or down. So I think that's where I got to go here is just procrastinate, and we'll revisit this later. But no, I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was I stand by it being the Timothy Dalton of Godzilla's, where it was like pretty straight, pretty serious, but still some goofiness creeps in. But I thought it worked. I liked it. And I thought the American one was mostly moved a little faster and felt pretty easily watchable, if a little I'd say like certainly less good. I think all the characters added don't actually help us at all. But yeah, I think both are purgatory for me.
I think that's fair. And I will say, whatever rating I'm about to give, because I'm not actually sure what I'm going to say.
Whoa, wild.
Do take into consideration that this movie was new to me, and I loved that feeling. It was like finding $50 in your wallet when you thought you were broke.
Right, but you've had it in your wallet since 2016.
For 7 years.
You have to spend it.
So I got a great thrill out of this new Godzilla movie that felt like a little bit like the ones I loved and a little bit like something I hadn't seen before. So to get down to cadmium tax here, there was a lot of unnecessary incompetence that we talked about. It was like the mistakes I look at and you're like, I see you haven't seen too many movies. Like the thing with the bird calls being really stupid and giving it up halfway through the movie. Why isn't one of our characters a Super X pilot? And then apart from the Prime Minister, all the characters in the Japanese version are pretty flat and boring, which is like a semi-common problem we've talked about, but usually there's something distinctive or funny or charming about them. That was not the case here. But I like the look and feel. I like the like gothic intention of the whole thing. And the music, the very gothic, romantic music. And I thought that the thematic places it went were really interesting, even if it didn't go deep enough. I liked how Japan felt like the perspective of a country trapped between two superpowers who want to use it as a pawn, and how the nuclear threat that created Godzilla never dies. So even if it doesn't go deep enough, I like it. I like how it all felt and looked. And so I'm inclined to give it a narrow heaven. I'll give that to both of them. And I feel like it's kind of a wash which one is better for me, because the American version moves a lot faster and has some like little touches with the editing and sound effects that I like. But it does have all those unnecessary characters, and it cuts out one of the best parts of the movie and changes a key story point in a very goofy Reaganist way. So it's a little bit of a trade-off. Do you want the original pure slow version, or do you want a little bit of a faster, funner ride at the cost of some of the proper intent. So that's where I ended up. Joanna?
Yeah. I would say at first when you were like, and we're going to watch 2 this time, I was like, oh, man. But I think it was actually very interesting to watch both if you are a Godzilla fan and have some time on your hands. I think it's a fascinating just look at some movies made during the Cold War. For me, I'm going to put the Japanese version in higher purgatory, almost close to heaven, but just the romantic relationships really, it did nothing. And then the American one in low purgatory, only really staying in purgatory and not hell because it is like just born of the roots of that Japanese version. But for me, for the Japanese version, I'm a history nerd, and I thought, yeah, again, like I said, all of those conversations of the Japanese prime minister talking to his staff, I was like, that could just like be a movie for me, and I'll stick with that. I thought those were really great. I think too, even I'm not sure if it was in the American one, but they had a scene where they showed when they were alerting people that this Soviet missile had gone off and were alerting everyone in that area of Tokyo to like get underground or get away from the missile. It wasn't just Godzilla, like they were running from the nuclear path. I thought that was really somber and kind of touched back on the first film, those kind of moments that came up. So I appreciated all of those and thought that they were executed well. I thought the relationship didn't work. But for the American one, it just was moving so like there was just nothing was sticking, and it was just so clearly like the propaganda of it of like true. We will use the weapon and America is the hero was just hilarious and too much. And then I think a point for it too, I feel like some of the films we've seen, it's like an hour of like kind of talking about Godzilla, kind of talking about aliens taking over, and then Godzilla comes up in the last like 20 minutes is actually on screen. I thought in these films, at least, like Godzilla was present from, midway through and all the way on. So I think just in terms of it being a Godzilla film, it gets points for that as well. But yeah, so high purgatory for me for the Japanese one, and the American one, just what a silly 1980, Reagan era project.
What a silly goose. All right, Carter, take us home.
I'm pretty close to Joanna, where I would say like the Japanese version thematically is just so interesting to me, and I just like dealing with these like concepts through Godzilla. Like Godzilla as a metaphor for nuclear destruction, I've always really thought it was really fascinating. So I the Japanese version just took me so pleasantly by surprise, and I didn't expect a like 80s Godzilla movie to be so somber in a lot of ways, and so for that I would give it a slight heaven. There's a lot of problems with it as we've gone over, but a movie that's like willing to take like such interesting swings is something that I always will give a lot of credit to. And so I'd give that one a slight heaven, the American version a slight purgatory. For the propaganda elements, the just sort of like cluttered elements, the way that I agree, I think it moves too fast in some ways. Like the pacing is fun at times, but also it kind of left me very confused without having seen the Japanese version first. So I would say that's my overall rating. It's definitely worth watching, even if you're a Godzilla casual. It's a surprising entry into the franchise and everything. So, definitely worth engaging with. So, a slight heaven for the Japanese, a purgatory for the American.
All right. Sounds like a lukewarm to nice response.
Yes. Yes. So, no, like I say, it's definitely worth engaging with to me.
I got a review. I kept forgetting the last couple episodes, so this is kind of an older one, but it's from this summer. This is an Apple Podcast review from Bug Drew. There's a couple confusing things about it, including the title, Coworkers Rage Against Godzilla, and I love it. They say, I discovered this podcast yesterday and I'm already 17 episodes in. Wow. The co-hosts are fun to listen to when I need to pass the time commuting or at work. You get to learn all about Godzilla without having to subject yourself to the movies themselves. And you can learn the good ones for the people who aren't that aren't diehard fans. As a fan, I love seeing the perspectives about the movies from the normal viewers that don't have stereotypical Godzilla nerd problems like, where's Godzilla? Or, this isn't the Godzilla I know and love. Or, I wish these people weren't in the movie. Even though we said that today. Even the controversial anime series, they had someone that liked the movies on as a guest host. So shout out for Greg, even though I think he only liked the first one. Would recommend this to anyone, provided they had 1.5 hours to spend in one stretch. That's not true. We don't make 1.5 hour episodes anymore. But
anymore, Ryan.
I understood
he was
your
starting
point.
from the beginning.
The co-hosts are funny and they make time go by, whether you like it or not. Another confusing statement.
If there's one thing I hate, it's people who pass the time.
They unwillingly make my time go by quickly.
All I want is to hold on to every precious second. Every moment that they speak, I'm losing
Never
seconds.
pass. Never leave me. I love that we're coworkers too in this. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, is he talking
I mean, a
about
podcast
us,
is
his
work.
coworkers? Sorry, there were a couple little confusing things about that, but thank you so much, Bug Drew.
Yeah,
it's a very
thank
nice
you.
message.
I love too that today I could be like, Ryan, how much did this guy get paid? Ryan, how much did that cost? And you knew all of it.
And I'm glad, in all seriousness, Bug Drew and others have mentioned that they are glad that there are Joanna and I can give opinions as people who are thoroughly unqualified to give opinions on these movies. And I am glad that is actually, that people appreciate that, because sometimes I think we are like, boy, should we even speak on this? Sometimes I feel like the things that we might be pointing out, I'm like, is this just going to anger people? So, or confuse people?
But we are also now like 812 films in. So like, I think now I'm starting to feel like I'm somewhat more qualified than 700 episodes ago.
I think a few episodes ago, around the Destroy All Monsters, is when I was like, okay, you guys have Godzilla opinions now, but apparently they're not as grating as the mainstream fan. We have one last special message. I learned recently that this is going to be the last episode that our editor Julia is going to edit, and she's been such a great contributor to the podcast. If you guys have liked some of like the funny sound effect stuff we've been doing recently, that's all Julia. She's really good about putting in like the reference clips, and I'm going to miss her. So thank you for everything you've done, Julia.
Thank you, Julia. So helpful and amazing for us. And best of luck with everything that's next.
As a professional editor, Julia's great, does a great job, and I think it's amazing how much work it takes to make us sound likable, and she does it every week. So no, we appreciate all that she's done, and again, good luck. It's it's an important job, and one that takes a lot of skill, and I don't think people always appreciate the amount of skill it takes, and she does a great job.
So thank you, and thank you to you, our audience, for listening. Recommend us to everyone you know. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It's nice and easy. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Subscribe to us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts so that you get them automatically. And thank you so much for supporting us and continuing to share us.
And thank you for joining us today, Carter. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I had a wonderful time. It's a fun show. What a great concept for a podcast, honestly, of just going through these silly, fun movies.
Thank you. Yeah, you were a great guest, and I hope to have you back sometime.
I do a podcast called Vaguebooking. It started out as a podcast about people's strange relationships to social media, and it's kind of blossomed into just talking about the internet and internet culture. We did a series this year called The People's History of the Internet, where we interviewed people who were influential to hacking culture, people who were just like influential to shaping the modern internet. And it was really fascinating and fun. So if you want to check that out, you can go back. And we had like a whole series of episodes that came out this year. You can check out.
Go listen to that, Godzillavangelists. Next time, we're going to be covering Godzilla versus Biollante. which is my favorite of this particular series, and a well-liked one. So that should be a lot of fun. You'll probably see that in the new year. So in the meantime, keep spreading the word of Godzilla.
Bye.
Godzillavangelists is produced by me, Ryan Sargent, with support from my friends Joanna Brodecki and Sam Schleicher. All our incredible music is composed by Robert Mai, and our wonderful artwork is drawn by Cassidy Stone. This episode was edited by Julia Waldman. Special thanks to our families, friends, and the talented artists who made the movies that we talked about today. Godzillavangelists is a satirical, critical work, not affiliated or endorsed by Toho, Legendary Pictures, or anyone behind the Godzilla series. Visit our website at GodzillaVangelists.com. We're also on Twitter at GodzillaCast and Instagram at GodzillaVangelists. If you prefer to listen to us online, we have a YouTube channel. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you join us again next time. In the meantime, keep spreading the word of Godzilla.